Honorable participants of the conference, let me introduce the results of the study English-Ukrainian Parallel Corpus of IT Text Application in Translation Studies carried out by Khrystyna, Mandziy, Uliana, Yurlova, and Marianna, Dilai. The topicality of our study is determined by the importance of the development of Ukrainian corpus linguistics, in which there is still a large gap in the parallel Ukrainian foreign corpora construction. There is a rapid growth of the information technology sphere in Ukraine, and IT terminology is changing and evolving rapidly. The translation of such terminology from English into Ukrainian needs additional attention. We see the theoretical value of the study in expanding the scope of research on IT terminology, defining and systematizing the peculiarities of its translation from English into Ukrainian, and the practical value of the research is that the parallel corpus of IT text and the macro program which have been developed during the study will be useful for linguists and translators and specialists in the field of information technology. The research object is a parallel corpus of IT text in the field of information technology, and the research subject peculiarities of the parallel corpus, creation of a practical application of its data for translation of IT terminology. The study was based on the text of 5 programming textbooks and 2 sites with technical documentation. In total, there are more than 300,000 words. The corpus linguistic techniques, including keywords, collocation, and concordance analysis, are used to extract a list of key IT terms in the corpus and determine their linguistic properties. Furthermore, a contrastive analysis of the extracted English IT terms and their Ukrainian translations is carried out, focusing on their common and divergent semantic features, metaphoricity, and structural types. The procedure of the parallel corpus creation using Corpus Manager and Text Analyzer Sketch Engine included some technical standardization and formatting of the text and aligning sentences with their translations. It should be noted that the corpus contains more than 10,000 aligned sentences, and Figure 1 presents general quantitative information about the created corpus. The next step was to retrieve the IT text from the created parallel corpus, and Sketch Engine makes it possible to extract the list of keywords automatically using keywords function, and the reference corpus in our case was British National Corpus. For further linguistic and translation analysis, we used top 205 English terms and extracted from the parallel corpus. The last step was to find the Ukrainian equivalents to the key IT terms in English using the parallel concordance function. This feature made it possible to trace the use of terms in context and to determine the methods of translation of each terminological unit found. We have developed a macro for the text analysis, which will allow the user to quickly use the database of English-Ukrainian parallel corpus of IT text and to translate their own text in the Microsoft Word editor. We have used environment Visual Basic for applications to build the macro program. The macro searches the text for words given in the glossary of the key IT terms and add hyperlinks to the corresponding concordance in Sketch Engine. Figure 4 shows a model of the process of using such a macro by the user. Figure 5 presents the text processed by the macro. 10 words from the text were found in the glossary of the key IT terms. Each term has a hyperlink which leads to the concordance of the corresponding term. Figure 6 shows the concordance constructed for the word syntax. The user is redirected to this concordance when clicking on the hyperlink added to the text in the Microsoft Word. The created macro gives access to a parallel concordance for words directly from the Microsoft Word editor. This significantly saves time by working with the text. By opening the concordance in Sketch Engine, the user can quickly get acquainted with the context of terms, usage, and possible translation options. We have analyzed 205 IT terms in English and their translations into Ukrainian in terms of type and method of translation, and established that the most typical for the translation of IT terminology are the following methods: transliteration, calc, explication, and equivalent methods. The most common translation method used in this investigation is calc, or loan translation. As a result, we found out that 84 out of 205 terms were translated using this method. For example, technology, technologia. Let's move to the analysis of lexical-semantic groups of IT terms. The analysis of lexical-semantic groups of 166 noun terms was carried out on the basis of classification proposed by Mandziy. So we differentiated names of knowledge areas, for example, programming and functional programming, names of specialists, for example, programmer, names of units of information, for example, byte, software names and their elements, terms related to the internet and internet communication. The group of terms described above make up only 27% of the studied noun terms. The rest of the terms cannot be attributed to any of the selected group. Therefore, having analyzed them, we distinguish three more groups: terms of programming theory, names of graphic interface elements, and names of graphic symbols. So the figure on the slide shows a pie chart illustrating the quantity ratio of lexical semantic groups of key IT terms in the English-Ukrainian parallel corpus of IT texts. So the next stage of our study was the analysis of metaphoric IT terminology in English and Ukrainian. The research materials contains 166 simple English terms and their Ukrainian equivalents, among which 85 English and 72 Ukrainian metaphoric terms were identified. The sample analysis shows that IT terms are often formed by metaphoric rethinking. We have distinguished the following source domains: clothing items, household items, tools, places, people, nature, actions and states, social life, position in space, and so on. In 14% of cases, we trade the change of the source domain when translating metaphorical terms. The table on the slide presents the results of quantitative analysis of source domains for the metaphorization of IT terms in English and Ukrainian. We distinguished the following groups of features on the basis of which the metaphorical transfer was carried out. The first one by form, then by function, by the mechanism of action, and by size. Comparing English metaphorical IT terms with the Ukrainian equivalents, we concluded that in most cases, the terms retain their metaphorical meaning in both languages. Speaking about structural types of IT terms, it should be noted that simple terms make up the majority of the studied list in the English IT terms, 70%. Among them, 1/3 are non-derivative terms and 2/3 are derivatives. Simple derivative terms are most numerous in our sample, more than half of all terms. Most of the English compound terms have the structure noun plus noun, for example, placeholder, followed by the modal adjective plus adjective, for example, white space, and verb by adverb, for example, drop down. Most of these terms are translated into Ukrainian by changing their structural model. A complex term consists of several elements that are connected in some way. Among them, the most productive are two-component models. There are more Ukrainian complex IT terms in our sample than English ones. The findings shows that the most productive models of transformation of the structure of terms are the models the following models: simple derivative into simple derivative, compound into compound, and simple non-derivative into simple non-derivative. We can conclude that when translating IT terms from English to Ukrainian, in 77.5% of cases, the structure of the term remains unchanged. The part-of-speech analysis of terms made it possible to establish the relationship between parts of speech in the terminological system. We have revealed a tendency in IT terminology to nomination. The prevalence of nouns in IT terminology is explained by the fact that terms mainly perform a nominative defining function. The results show that nouns are followed by verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. In general, 93% of simple terms retain their part of speech affiliation during translation. And in course of our research, using the data and features of the created English-Ukrainian parallel corpus of IT texts, we made an attempt to single out the most common methods of IT terms translation and their linguistic peculiarities. The Corpus Manager sketch engine was used to provide convenient and fast access to the corpus. Furthermore, a macro program was created for the translation of IT text in the text editor Microsoft Word. The paper outlines the advantages of using a parallel corpus during translation and encourages further improvement of the parallel corpus in accordance with certain translation needs in order to achieve the highest level of equivalence of translated text and the original text to meet the expectation of the translation recipient. The study opens us prospects for further research on the parallel corpus in order to identify new useful means of facilitating the work of translator. And we see the prospects in the further expansion of the text base of the created English-Ukrainian parallel corpus of IT text. This will contribute to its greater representativeness and further linguistic and translation study of English and Ukrainian IT terminology. Thank you for your attention.